Hello? Today we will explore a strange case that lasted 15 years full of schemes and deceit. The case itself astonished people, but the subsequent developments led to many other cases. This is the famous case that occurred in the United States. The story took place in 2001 in the city of Durham, North Carolina, located in the southeastern United States. Durham covers an area of 280 square kilometers and is home to the prestigious Duke University. At that time, the city's population was about 200,000 people, with the ratio of white and black people being about equal, each group making up around 40%. The story we are about to delve into took place here. The main character of the story is Michael Peterson, born in 1943. He studied political science at Duke University and worked in an office job for the United States Department of Defense. In 1965, at the age of 22, Michael married his first wife, Patricia. A few years after getting married, Michael joined the Marine Corps and served in Vietnam. In 1971, he was honorably discharged after being injured in a car accident. Michael and Patricia had two sons, the elder named Todd and the younger named Clayton. After that, the family of four moved to Germany. His wife Patricia worked as an elementary school teacher at a United States military base. In Heidelberg, Germany, they became friends with their neighbors, the Ratliffs. Since both families were American, they became very close. However, it was unfortunate that Mr. and Mrs. Ratliff both passed away within 2 years, leaving behind two young daughters, Margaret and Martha. In response to this situation, Michael decided to adopt the two young girls and treated them as his own children. 2 years later, Michael and Patricia divorced. Their two sons stayed with Patricia while the two adopted daughters lived with Michael. After being discharged, Michael used his war experiences to write novels. His works became bestsellers, turning him from a former soldier into a famous novelist who made a lot of money. After returning to the United States, Michael met Kathleen, who was 10 years younger than him. She was an executive director at Nortel Networks. In 1989, Michael bought a 3.2-acre plot of land with a villa covering an area of about 1,000 square meters in Durham, North Carolina. The villa had 14 rooms, a garden, a swimming pool, and many other features. It looked magnificent and was once chosen as a filming location. After purchasing this villa, Michael moved in with his girlfriend Kathleen, and his two sons also moved from Germany. In 1997, after 8 years of living together, Michael and Kathleen got married. Their relationship was very good, and the children got along well. In 2001, he was 58 years old, standing next to his wife Kathleen, 48 years old, married to Michael for 4 years. Next is the eldest son, Todd, 25 years old, and the youngest son, Clayton, 23 years old. Their mother, Patricia, was living in Germany. Then there were Margaret, 20 years old, and Martha, 18 years old, the two daughters Michael adopted when they were young. Finally, there was Caitlin, 19 years old, Kathleen's daughter from her previous marriage. The whole family lived happily together, but then one night in December 2001, something unexpected happened. At 2:41 a.m. on December 9th, 2001, the 911 operator in Durham received an emergency call. The caller was the 58-year-old famous novelist Michael Peterson. After receiving the call, the dispatch sent an ambulance to Michael's house as quickly as possible. At 2:46, Michael called 911 again to report the incident. 2 minutes after Michael's second call, the ambulance arrived at the scene, and Michael's eldest son Todd was also present. Michael's villa had 2 floors with staircases on both the east and west sides. 2 paramedics entered the house and discovered a middle-aged woman lying motionless at the foot of the west staircase, her head resting against the wall, her legs extended down the hallway. There was blood on her body, on the floor, on the walls, and on the stairs. The woman lying there was none other than Michael's current wife, 48-year-old Nortel Networks executive Kathleen. After examining her, the paramedics confirmed that Kathleen had stopped breathing and her heart had stopped beating. A little over 10 minutes after the ambulance arrived, the police also arrived at the scene. They cordoned off the area, established a crime scene, and began the investigation. Seeing the blood-soaked body at the foot of the stairs, the police's first impression was that this was definitely not a simple accidental fall down the stairs, as they had never seen someone injured so severely from a fall. After a preliminary examination of the scene, the police found no signs of forced entry. The first person to discover the victim was Michael, who was also the one who called 911, making him the prime suspect in the case. At this time, Michael was sitting to the side looking extremely sorrowful over the loss of his beloved wife, leaving him devastated. His son Todd was beside him comforting his father. Michael even asked Todd if he should get a lawyer. Todd immediately called his Uncle Bill, a practicing lawyer in Las Vegas. Over the phone, Uncle Bill advised Todd that since Michael was now a suspect in the case, it was best not to say anything until they found a good lawyer. The next day, forensic doctors conducted an autopsy, and the report showed that Kathleen's body had a total of 35 injuries, including 7 severe lacerations on the back of her head, a fractured thyroid cartilage in her neck, and multiple bruises and abrasions on her face, back, arms, and hands. Kathleen's blood alcohol level was 0.07%, slightly below the 0.08% threshold for safe driving in the United States, indicating that she had consumed some alcohol but was not intoxicated. The forensic conclusion for the cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. Blunt force trauma is a medical term often used to describe injuries caused by strong physical impact, which can result from being struck with a hard object or by falling and hitting something. Although the conclusion was somewhat general, the forensic report also expressed an opinion that Kathleen had suffered more than one form of blunt force trauma. These injuries caused internal bleeding in her brain, and after about 1.5 to 2 hours, Kathleen died from excessive blood loss. The police arrested Michael for the investigation, and he faced charges of murder. Over a week after the incident, Michael hired a team of lawyers to defend him in court, including renowned defense attorney David Rudolph, who had extensive experience in criminal cases. Private Detective Ron Garrett, a former police officer now providing investigative services for various clients and experts in different fields, also joined this team. According to Michael's testimony, he and his wife Kathleen were watching TV that night. Around 11 o'clock, Todd went out with friends to a party. Michael then went into the kitchen and saw the phone's indicator light blinking. He picked up the phone and heard a voicemail from Kathleen's colleague asking her to call the company back immediately. Kathleen called the company back and was informed that she had to participate in a conference call the next morning. This surprised Kathleen, as she had to stay up late to prepare documents for the meeting, so she and Michael went to the pool to chat and sip some wine. Later, Kathleen went back to her office while Michael stayed at the pool to smoke. About 45 minutes later, Michael went back into the house, locked all the doors, and prepared to go to bed. At that moment, he discovered Kathleen lying unconscious in a pool of blood at the foot of the stairs. Michael called out to his wife, but Kathleen did not respond. Panicked, he immediately called the police. He then took a towel to place under Kathleen's head. At that moment, Michael realized that Kathleen might be in critical condition because she had lost so much blood. Not long after, the ambulance and his son Todd arrived at the scene. After posting a bail of $850,000, Michael was released, but he had to await the prosecution's decision. Mr. Jim Hardin, the prosecutor of Durham County, was in charge of this case. The prosecution was actively gathering evidence and witnesses to strengthen the charges. Michael's legal team was also working tirelessly. They contacted experts in various fields for help. They reached out to an experienced forensic expert who had testified for the defense in the O.J. Simpson case, Dr. Lee Chang-yu, also known as the Chinese Sherlock Holmes. On October 14, 2002, Dr. Lee visited Michael's home and spent 4 hours meticulously examining the crime scene, paying particular attention to the shape of the bloodstains. After thoroughly investigating the case, Dr. Lee decided he would testify for Michael in court. However, when Kathleen's autopsy report was released, public outrage ensued. Most people believed that Michael was the one who killed his wife after reading this report. A month later, Michael broke his silence and spoke to the media, asserting that he did not kill his wife and was not a murderer. He claimed that his wife had fallen down the stairs due to an accident, but many could not accept this explanation. They questioned, how could a fall down the stairs lead to 7 lacerations on the back of the head? What did Michael's children think about this? In fact, apart from Caitlin, Kathleen's daughter from a previous marriage, all of Michael's other children sided with him. From the beginning, they believed that their father could not have committed murder. In contrast, Caitlin was convinced that her mother had been murdered by Michael. Kathleen's sister Candace also shared Caitlin's belief and completely opposed Michael. 5 months after the incident, Mr. Hardin, the Durham County prosecutor, released a shocking report that mentioned an incident in Germany. Prosecutor Hardin unexpectedly discovered that Elizabeth Ratliff was found dead at the foot of the stairs in her own home. At that time, German police concluded that Elizabeth Ratliff had suffered a stroke, leading to a fall down the stairs, and treated the case as an accident. However, Barbara, the Ratliff's maid, vividly remembered blood on the floor, walls, and head, making it even more chilling that Michael had visited Elizabeth's house that day. Both incidents involved stairs, and Michael was present at the scene in both cases. Could this be just a coincidence, or is there another story behind it? At that time, German police had no suspicions, so they did not conduct an autopsy on Elizabeth. Elizabeth's body was brought back to the United States for burial. At this point, an idea occurred to Prosecutor Hardin. If they could conduct an autopsy on Elizabeth, they might find new evidence. After completing the legal procedures and obtaining the family's consent, Elizabeth's body was exhumed for autopsy. The autopsy report showed that Elizabeth did not die from a stroke. She had head injuries caused by a hard object. Although these injuries were not as severe as the wounds on Kathleen's head, it was clear that they were also inflicted by a hard object. On July 1st, 2003, Michael Peterson's trial officially began. He was charged with first-degree murder. The jury consisted of 12 members, including 4 men and 8 women, along with 4 alternate judges. The trial focused on whether Kathleen fell down the stairs by accident or was murdered. In the prosecution's opening statement, Prosecutor Hardin presented a piece of evidence, a fireplace poker. This poker was a replica Kathleen's sister Candace had previously given Kathleen a fireplace poker. This poker was always kept by the fireplace in Michael's house but mysteriously disappeared after the incident. The police believe this was the weapon Michael had used. That night, Michael made a call to report the incident at 2:41 a.m., claiming Kathleen was still breathing. At 2:48 a.m., just 7 minutes after Michael's initial call, 2 paramedics arrived at the scene. According to the paramedics, Kathleen showed no signs of life when they arrived, and part of the blood on the floor had already dried. If Michael's claim that Kathleen was still alive at 2:41 a.m. were true, why had the blood dried so quickly? The forensic doctor also stated that in the staircase fall cases he had handled, victims usually had only 1 or 2 injuries. This was the first time he had seen a case with such severe injuries with dozens of wounds like Kathleen's. The victim had a broken hyoid bone indicating an attempt to strangle her, and the 7 head wounds suggested repeated blows with a hard object. The injuries on her arms indicated defensive wounds. Based on his expertise, the forensic doctor concluded that these injuries were not caused by a fall down the stairs but by being beaten. Next, the prosecution's witness bloodstain pattern analyst, Dwayne Deaver, was called to testify. He conducted an experiment using a fireplace poker to strike a bag of blood to observe the bloodstain patterns. From this, he concluded that the perpetrator must have delivered at least 4 strong blows to create the bloodstain patterns found at the crime scene. Deaver asserted that he had participated in over 200 investigations and had extensive experience in bloodstain pattern analysis. According to him, the bloodstains at the crime scene match those typically formed when a victim is struck with a hard object. He showed the jury a model of the entire staircase, which had 18 steps, and suggested that the perpetrator stood outside the staircase and swung the weapon to attack the victim. He used theory and experimentation to explain the bloodstain patterns, asserting that they were formed by the victim being struck with a hard object. The prosecution also pointed out that Michael and Kathleen's marriage was not happy, and Michael was accused of having an affair during their marriage. The police found emails on Michael's computer exchanged with a young person indicating an illicit relationship. Based on this evidence, the prosecution hypothesized that on the night of the incident, Kathleen discovered Michael's affair while using the computer. Enraged, she rushed downstairs to confront Michael, and the two had a heated argument. Michael picked up the fireplace poker and beat Kathleen to death, then tried to clean up the scene. This is why there were wipe marks on the walls. However, due to the excessive blood, Michael gave up and took the poker outside to hide it, accidentally dropping a drop of blood on the ground, which is why the police found a drop of Kathleen's blood in the backyard. That night, Michael was wearing shorts and a t-shirt. There was blood on the inside of his shorts, indicating he was very close to Kathleen when she was attacked. Otherwise, the blood would not have stained the inside of his shorts. Behind Kathleen's body, the police found a bloodstain matching the pattern of Michael's sneakers. On the kitchen table, there were 2 empty glasses. One glass had Michael's fingerprints while the other was unclear. Michael seemed to suggest to the police that Kathleen had been drinking and fell down the stairs due to being intoxicated in the dark. At that time, Michael's family was facing financial difficulties. Michael had no income since 1999, and he had to pay the high tuition fees for his children. His credit card debt amounted to $143,000. For the past 2 years, the family had been living on Kathleen's income. Although Kathleen was an executive at Nortel Networks and owned company stock after the stock price plummeted, the $2 million worth of shares were now only worth $500,000. Investigations showed that Kathleen had a $1.5 million life insurance policy with Michael as the sole beneficiary, providing a potential motive for Michael to commit murder. Defense attorney Rudolph argued that Michael and Kathleen loved each other deeply. Everyone who knew them, family, friends, colleagues, and neighbors, considered them a model couple. No one had ever witnessed them arguing or Michael exhibiting violent behavior towards his wife. Michael admitted to having relationships with men while married to Kathleen, but that did not mean their marriage had problems. In the emails found by the police, Michael even mentioned to his lover that he was very happy in his marriage. Although Kathleen had 7 wounds on the back of her head, her skull was not fractured and there was no brain hemorrhage. Dr. Lee Chang-yu pointed out in court that there were no bloodstains on the ceiling or the top of the stairs. If the perpetrator had used a hard object to attack the victim, they would have had to raise the weapon high and strike with great force. In doing so, blood would have splattered onto the ceiling, yet there were no bloodstains there. Based on his expertise and experience, Dr. Lee leaned towards the hypothesis that this was an accidental fall down the stairs. Inside the courtroom, the legal battle was intense, while outside the media covered the case extensively. The trial lasted over 4 months and became one of the longest trials in North Carolina history. During the trial, the fireplace poker suspected to be the murder weapon was found. Michael's eldest son Todd discovered it. The poker covered in dust and cobwebs was found in a corner of the storage room. Forensic tests showed no traces of blood on it. The court accepted this evidence, but it did not significantly help Michael's case. On October 10, 2003, after 5 days of deliberation, the jury reached a unanimous verdict declaring Michael Peterson guilty of first-degree murder and sentencing him to life in prison. After the verdict was announced, Michael remained calm, knowing that this result meant he would spend the rest of his life in prison. Michael's children cried out in anguish, unable to accept the outcome and believing their father had been wrongfully convicted. Defense attorney Rudolph did his best, but he couldn't help Michael escape conviction. In the following years, Rudolph filed multiple appeals, but the courts rejected all of them, citing insufficient evidence. In 2010, the prosecution's key witness bloodstain analyst Duane Deaver was unexpectedly embroiled in a scandal. In 1991, a man named Greg Taylor found a dead body while driving. The police discovered a stain resembling blood in Taylor's car. Taylor was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life imprisonment, wrongly serving 17 years due to Deaver, the analyst responsible for the blood test, who had concealed the results. In fact, Deaver had tested the stain and knew it wasn't human blood, but he chose to hide this report to convict Taylor. Deaver's actions resulted in Taylor's wrongful imprisonment for 17 years. It was Deaver's experiment results and testimony about the bloodstains that convinced the jury that Michael was the perpetrator. Now, with Deaver's scandal-exposed attorney, Rudolph believed this was the opportunity to overturn the case. He filed an appeal citing Deaver's misconduct, revealing that Deaver's testimony during the trial was fabricated. He had not participated in 200 cases as he claimed. In reality, Deaver had handled only 34 cases at that time, with direct involvement in just 17, none of which involved a staircase fall. Could someone like this be considered an expert? Was his testimony reliable? At this point, Michael had been imprisoned for 8 years. Attorney Rudolph filed a lawsuit demanding a retrial based on Deaver's misconduct. The court agreed to reopen Michael Peterson's case, granting him bail and placing him under house arrest. However, Rudolph knew that relying solely on Deaver's scandal wouldn't be enough to persuade the jury. Even with a retrial, Michael might not be acquitted. So he found another way out for Michael, accepting the Alford plea. This is a plea deal in United States law, where the defendant acknowledges there is enough evidence to convict them, but does not admit guilt. On February 24, 2017, Michael officially accepted the Alford plea, which legally meant he admitted to killing his wife. Consequently, Michael Peterson was sentenced to 64 to 86 months in prison. Since he had already served 98.5 months, the court declared Michael immediately free, concluding the 15-year-long case. Despite accepting the Alford plea, Michael maintained his innocence, and the public continued to debate whether he was truly guilty. Subsequently, a completely new theory emerged: the owl attack hypothesis. At that time, Michael's neighbors owned owls whose claw marks resembled the wounds on Kathleen's head. The police also found an unidentified feather and some twigs at the scene. Kathleen's autopsy report noted she had hair clutched in her hand. This theory suggested that Kathleen had been attacked by an owl while on the stairs, causing her to fall. Attorney Rudolph mentioned that no one had considered this hypothesis then because social media didn't exist and the internet wasn't widespread, limiting access to information. It wasn't until later incidents of owl attacks on humans that people considered this possibility. However, it remained just a hypothesis, as there wasn't enough evidence at the scene to support it. So do you think Kathleen fell down the stairs accidentally, or was she murdered by Michael? Or is there another possibility? Share your opinion below, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel to support us. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.